Dr. Jazz.
Where are you? New York? Home?
Yep, I'm at home here in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah,
Super. Great.
that's where I
Man,
live. Yep.
good that we found the time finally. We've been
Yeah.
we've been planning this for a year or something, or 2 years actually. I think.
Yeah. I'm sorry it didn't work out last time.
Oh, no
You
worries.
know how
No worries.
things go, but I'm glad we got to get to do this finally. So
Yeah. Uh, I'll just jump in, man. I have you on so many records, and I've done this talk with so many guys that you played with, and but I want to start this talk with Mark Turner because I saw you with Mark in Vienna like 2 years ago, I think, and you guys have such
okay,
a
yeah,
strong connection. Like,
uh,
what's your story with Mark, and how did you begin with him?
okay. Well, yeah. Well, Mark, I met Mark. We both moved to New York in the early '90s. I think him a little bit before me. So I moved to New York at the very end of 1993,
All
beginning
right.
of 1994. That's usually when I cite my beginning of living in New York City. And I'm trying to think the first time we met. I'm not 100% sure exactly, but it was either we played a session somewhere in Brooklyn or we might have played a gig together once. Been on a gig together at this place called Augie's,
Oh yeah.
which was used to be that was what the current club Smoke is took the place of that. Although it's a completely reinvented place and its Smoke is now long established. But before that, it was kind of a dive bar that had music 7 nights a week. So I'm not sure if Mark and I met there, but one strong connection. Besides both living in New York City through the session, playing sessions at people's houses, was one person I did play with for the first time at Augie's was Jorge Rossi, the drummer,
Oh really?
and
Oh, okay.
yeah, we played there probably with a guitar player who became a Pandero player, this guy Scott Feiner, who sadly is no longer with us, but he used to have a regular gig up there and hired great cats all over the city. So that's where I met a lot of people when I first moved to New York.
Mm.
Um, uh, and so with Mark, I think our first real connection was playing. So Jorge had knew Mark, of course, from Boston and from Berkeley,
Yeah.
and they were starting a group that was going to play some of the repertoire of Lee Konitz, Lenny Tristano, Warren Marsh. So it was a group with Jorge, a pianist named Michael Kanan, also from
Hmm.
Boston, who was then living and also still lives here in New York, um, and an alto player, Swiss alto player named Nat Su, and but he'd also been at Boston, and they had worked on just learning some of those tunes and checking out that language that Marsh and Konitz and
Yeah.
Tristano had. And so we were going to play. It was kind of going to be sort of start as a repertoire band. So we played a lot of those tunes, and but also people started bringing in some original music as well. So it was kind of a collaborative thing. Although it was really, Jorge put it together, and I felt like it was sort of Nat and Mark who were contributing most of the repertoire, as well as this sort of the 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 all the tunes
Yeah.
of Tristano Martian. So and that band did a couple of records in the '90s, and we did some tours. Usually in Switzerland because that's where Nat lived, but also we
Right.
played. I think we probably played a bit in Spain too because Jorge was always able to hook things up in Spain. And I think that was sort of the first my first real significant time playing with Mark was in those situations. And then we also and he hired me when he started having a. I mean, of course, we also played together in Kurt Rosenwinkel's band.
Oh yeah.
But that was a little bit when that became more of a regular thing. That was a little bit after that. That was really more in the 2000s that I played with Kurt. So even before that, I don't think we played. We played on oh, there is another really cool early record that we all played on together. It was a recording in Spain. This was also kind of a Jorge Rossi kind of got us all together on this, but it was a great alto player in Spain named Perico Sambiat,
Oh
and
yeah,
he was
yeah.
doing great
Huh.
player, great musician, and he had a project that was jazz, but he had written a lot of music that had a lot of flamenco influences from the rhythmic standpoint. So it was a fusion of sorts, and so that we did a record. I think that was probably in the summer of, I'm going to say, 1995. We all
Okay.
went over there one summer, and it was myself and Kurt and Mark and Jorge, of course, and Brad Meldau was on the date, and so that was
That's
also
that
Michael
record,
Lenhart.
New York,
The record is
Barcelona, right? No,
no,
that's not the one,
this
right?
record
No.
is no, that's not the one. That's I think that's a quartet record that was the band that I think well, I'm not sure who's on that record. I know,
I'll
of
check it out.
course, Jorge is, and I believe Brad is, but I think that's a small group record. This was really a project. It's called Adamus, Adamuth, if you say it correctly. Try to say it correctly, Spanish accent. And that's really Perico's record and project. So it was I think it ended up being it's a fresh sound. I think it's probably still a fresh sound unless they moved it over to a label. But anyway, that was kind of a cool early experience where we all were in the same session together, and it was a very cool session. And we were all over kind of hanging out together and
Oh, that's nice.
surviving the heat in Spain in July and doing this recording session. But it was an amazing experience for me, early experience for me, because it was playing with all these great people that I knew a bit. It's the first time I ever played with Brad, but just another time that I played with Mark in those kind of early years. And then I think he hired me to play when he got signed to Warner Brothers. He did his one or two recordings, and then he had I believe it was a week of gigs at a club that's no longer there in New York, but Sweet Basil's, which was
Oh yeah,
a very
yeah,
important club in the West Village.
yeah.
I mean, I used to go there and hear a ton of incredible music. And anyway, so Mark hired me to play on some of those gigs. Um, it was just before I think we recorded, or around the time he recorded his record called In This World.
Yeah.
So I'm not on those records, but I did some gigs with him around that time. So yeah, that's really kind of my early times, the experiences that I remember playing with Mark in those first years when I was in New York City. And
That's
then
like
later on,
30 years. Yeah.
yeah, I know, exactly. Thanks. Yeah, I had my 30-year anniversary last year, I was
Insane.
like, I can't believe it. I still can't believe I've been here for 30 years. Time flies.
Yeah.
And then, we were played through New York, played on different gigs and different recording sessions together when we both be hired as side people. And then in the 2000s, we played in a version of Kurt Rosenwinkel's band at that time. When Kurt, after,
You're on Remedy, right?
yeah,
Remedy.
the
Yeah, yeah,
Remedy, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that band, basically,
That's a cool one.
different versions of that band. So we spent a lot of time on the road together and playing together. So I guess, yeah, I'm sort of going to those early 90s days when we were both here and just meeting through the channels of New York City, as we all did, ending up on gigs together, jam sessions together at people's houses. I lived in the Upper West, way uptown, well, not way uptown, but pretty far uptown, 123rd and Broadway. In Manhattan, my first 11 years in New York. And so I used to a lot of musicians lived in Brooklyn. So I would go out to Brooklyn a lot and play sessions there like regularly, like
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of musicians there, played at a lot of different people's houses people had setups to play, usually at a piano player or a drummer's place, or a lot of musicians, or sometimes they all lived in the same house. It was
Yeah.
it was an amazing time when I think about it, when I reflect back upon it, because that was very formative years when I first came to New York, and just kind of starting from scratch. And yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like your generation. I mean, like you mentioned all these guys already, and then there's the bass players. I think Matt Penman and Ben Street and the elders were still alive and still playing. Like I remember I once talked with Drew Grass, and he told me he came to New York like I think mid '80s the first time, and he said like some piano player, I don't know, who hired him and wrote him in the book, and he said like the piano player had a book, and Drew checked out like, okay, his phone number, and then above there was like Eddie Gomez and Mark Johnson's numbers, and he said like, shit, man, I'm never gonna play. How was that like for you when you, as a bassist, coming, mid-90s to New York? And
yeah, it was certainly very intimidating in one way, and inspiring in another, and just sort of getting past the sort of the curiosity and wondering what New York's going to be like, because until you move here, you don't really know, and people will tell you all sorts of things. They would say, oh, I heard everything from like, yeah, you got to go to New York, to, oh, you shouldn't go to New York until you're really ready and you really have you really have everything together, and and those things could be said often by people who had never lived in New York, or maybe had only lived here for a very short amount of time, because there's no one way to do it. And I had finished school. I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to school for a couple of years in Chicago, and then I transferred to William Patterson College in New Jersey, which is just outside of New York City, because I was getting the New York fever, the desire, just because I just kept, I had really become passionate about getting better at playing the bass and learning how to play jazz, and everything just kept drawing me closer and closer to New York, and I wasn't getting what I needed in Chicago, as nice of a transition city as Chicago was. But at that time, now I think the scene there is much better amongst young people, but at that time there weren't, at least where I was going to school, there weren't, except for a couple of people, there just wasn't a lot going on with young people just trying to get it together. So, and as I made my way to New York, and William Patterson at that time, Rufus Reed was the head of the program, and I remember I had sent him a cassette demo tape to audition for the program, and I had come back to my dorm room. I was going to DePaul University at the time in Chicago, and I had my answering machine and that I shared with my roommates, and there was like a message, and I hear this booming voice, and it's Rufus Reed leaving me a voicemail at my dormitory in Chicago. Hey, Mr. Martin, heard your tape, listened to your tape, sound pretty good. If you're interested in coming to the program, we have a space for you next year. So let us know what you want to do. And then, hang up. And I was just like, heart and throat. And so that draw of New York, so I guess going back to what is that like when you get here? Well, I was I wasn't quite here yet, but I finished school close to it so I could go into the city and hear amazing music and get a taste of like, wow, okay, that's the level. All right. And then you get to New York, and you just dig in and you realize, your sort of idea and the romantic idea of like, wow, this is where all these amazing players that I've listened to on records for all these years, they live, but you have no idea. And then you go to New York, and it's a big kind of intimidating place, but also that's where everybody lives. And yes, you're joining, whether you realize it or not, whatever instrument you play, you're joining everybody else. So you're joining a list that includes the greatest musicians in the world, So you might not be, your main name is probably going to be down the rungs a bit on that list, but you are going to be on that list if you can play. And if somebody that's the thing, is you would play a gig and say, oh, I like the way you play, or oh, hey, you sound good, man, can I get your number? And of course, in those days, the thing that you described Drew doing, everybody had a book, you write down the number. There was no, this is 30 years ago, we didn't have cell phones yet, and the internet was just starting. When I moved to New York, the internet was just, it existed, but as far as like a thing that people were using and doing stuff on, it was not, it was just beginning. So it's kind of unbelievable. It makes me feel really old when I think about that. But in some ways that hasn't changed. The way you meet people and interact with people, it's the same. This is a social music. You have to go out and play it with people. And as much as the world has gotten much smaller with the internet and social media, and you can hear all kinds of stuff online, but until you actually play with a person and know what that feels like, and that still has to happen. You can get recommended, but then you still have to play with people, and so that in that sense it hasn't changed. So whether you're writing scribbling down somebody's phone number on the back of a napkin in a club because that's all you have, or as we do now, direct messaging people on any number of apps, or I mean, you don't even have to take people's numbers. Oh, I'm hit me on the gram or whatever people use, So yeah.
It's just funny, like the 90s, I think, when I think about it, because like so many guys moved also out of the city now in the last few years, and back then I think everyone was there still, right? And
yeah, I mean, when I used to go, I mean, both just before I was actually living in the city, but and those couple of years when I was at William Patterson coming into the city, I would just go in, I would hear Tommy Flanagan Trio with George Mraz and Lewis Nash, or with Peter Washington, or Hank Jones with Peter Washington and George Mraz, or sometimes it'd be Ron Carter, or I mean, just the so many different things you heard, and everybody was around, and you could just go hear those people, and I didn't have a lot of money, but it somehow felt like you could sort of get to know the guy at the door, whether it was at Sweet Basil's or Bradley's was another great place like that. Cedar Walton, all the piano players used to play there all the time, and that was kind of the hang for those older generation people. They all played there and they all hung out there, and that's where they would go after their gigs. If they were playing around town, that's where everybody came and hung. So, and it was just, that was intimidating because I was still observing. I was listening and observing and just it takes a while to break through. And when I came to New York, I didn't, I had finished school, but I didn't really move into the city with, I knew a couple people, but the people I had been with at school were either still there or not in the city. So I really kind of started from scratch. And one of my first roommates in New York was the great tenor player Joel Fromm. So we were that was a stroke of luck because we were living in the same place. I was instantly living in New York with a great young musician, similar age, who was already starting to play, was already playing around and knew people because he had been at Manhattan School. He had graduated and he was playing around town, and he used to play a lot at the aforementioned Augie's, and eventually had a steady night there. And then he started hiring me to play there because he knew me from home. He knew that because we were both, at home and practicing, and we would play together sometimes. Say, hey, you want to play? We'd play in the living room, whatever. And it's like, so it's kind of amazing these by chance, not, either situations, these scenarios, how you meet people. But yeah, you just have you come here and you just start and you start just, putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
And sadly, I mean, many of it seems like a weekly thing where we're losing more and more of the musicians of that era. We've already lost many, and it's just the attrition of age, and it's the reality. So I'm really happy I've got to see a lot of them back in that time, and played with some of them over the years,
absolutely.
Yeah.
How did Passage happen, Joe? I mean, like, I was on Fresh Sound also back then. I did 2 albums, and I bought so many, and Jordy gave me a lot of records that were out at that time, like early 2000s, and I still have the CD of Passage. And
oh wow, cool. Well, thank you for that.
It's beautiful writing. I listened to it yesterday, like the Poppy song and the other tunes. It's a beautiful record.
Yeah, people. Bass players come up to me and people know Poppy's song. That one keeps coming back over the years because it just has this bass riff that I came up with, and so it's got a immediate hook, because it has this starts with this solo bass line that's kind of the hook of the whole tune. And I think that's one of the first songs that I ever wrote. And let's see, that record. So yeah, we recorded that right around 9/11. So late,
exactly.
In fact, I think just a couple months probably after that, I think we were supposed to do it much closer to that date, and we had to postpone it for obvious reasons. So, it just came about because I had been starting to play quite a bit as a bass player, as a side person in different groups. and which was kind of my dream. I mean, it's interesting now because I think there's people come to New York. A lot of people have already have a lot of a lot of original writing together or projects that they're doing. That I think that even starts in schools now, the way the school systems
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
But my whole dream, I based my whole thing on just the idea of being a great side person, a great bass player, because that's what all my heroes did. That I looked up to on records, like, wow, here's Ron Carter on all these records, or going back before that, or here's you know, I don't know, Mark Johnson, he playing all these different side projects. He has his own projects, but that was, you know, you wanted to be like the next the dream was to be the next bass player in line to get called for one of these great gigs. And but you know, as time goes on, you also realize too that but I was also starting to play with people who were great writers, and I hadn't done a lot of my own writing. So I would go down to, it's when Small sort of first opened up in that mid '90s period. So, and a lot of of course, there was a lot of great players playing standards, but then there was also there was Kurt's band. Kurt had a regular night there, his band with Mark and Ben Street and Jeff Ballard, and Kurt had this repertoire, this extremely strong voice as a composer. So that became everybody would go down there, not everybody, but it was that was the thing that was happening in our generation, go down to Small, check out Kurt's band, because it was these great musicians playing this great music, and it was wow, what's that? That's really special. And you had things started churning. People started having leader nights. Like Jason Lindner had his big band down there, and he was writing music for that and doing that or something. And then there was just a lot of different kind of band leader type people. There was Guillermo Klein. He was playing. I used to sub in his band at a place. There was a club in the East Village called the C Note. Well, there was CBGB's Gallery. Mm-hmm. So there would often be I believe it was on either Sunday nights or Monday nights, there would be a double bill there. It would be one of Kurt's bands, and then it would be Guillermo's band, and then his regular bass player. A lot of those guys lived in Boston, so they weren't always necessarily down here, or they were in between. So he would call me to play, and I'd play upright in his band, and it worked out great, and it was a great experience for me. So, but you start to play with all these people writing all this amazing music. So you're not just playing. Of course, I was playing a lot of standards and stuff, but hearing all this music, and it just starts to get in your ear, and you start getting infected by these people with these very strong compositional voices. So, and then at some point, and I was doing sideman gigs, but also not always doing sideman gigs, and then maybe doing some gigs that were paying my bills, but I didn't feel like I was 100% getting acknowledging all sides of my musical self. And I was like, well, I should try to write some music, and then Jorge Rossi comes back in the picture, because I was playing a lot with him in different projects, and he was organizing. It's like, yeah, I think he said, yeah, you should, if you have music, I get in touch with Jordi, and you can do, because he was recording a lot of stuff at that time, a lot of different projects. As there's a lot of great,
incredible. Yeah, that early
music.
2000s, man, it's insane. Like on Fresh Sound,
all kinds of people, and I was hearing bass players leading bands too. You had Omer Avital had his band. He was doing stuff. Of course, Avishai Cohen, the bass player, was super active and starting to lead projects and record stuff. Reed Anderson, Bad Plus, was he was writing a lot. So it was like, wow, all these guys are writing a lot too. And so I was just like, well, let me try to do this as well, and just explore that side of myself. And I realized, oh yeah, this is. So I think when you first start writing, it's actually, some ways it's easier when you haven't done a lot of writing yet. So it's like, certain things just kind of come a little bit more naturally. You're starting with a blank slate, but sort of have these sounds in your head and not doing too much editing, and not too worried about if they sound like things or not. Just trying to get, figure out how to put a song together, how to have a form and a melody. And so anyway, that music that I wrote for Passage was probably all written around that time probably in the late 1990s. Probably most of it in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and yeah.
How do you see yourself as? I mean, I listened today to the last one you did, and there's some beautiful melodies, like Two Birds. That's such a nice melody that you wrote.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful ballad. Like, how have you progressed in your eyes as a composer and band leader? I mean, it's 20 years between those two records, let's say.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that's as you can see, I'm still primarily a side person in bands because I'm not putting out original music all the time, which is that's on me totally. So
it's a costly adventure also. So it's
now
thing.
And even more because there's just exactly it's basically a labor of love, but at the same time it's important to put your music out. So so I'm not somebody who's writing all the time, so I'll usually write in certain moments when I feel like, hey, I need to spend some time trying to come up with some new music. I've written some newer music in the last couple of years. It's challenging because it's just like I think for me I tend to I've played so much music as a side person now. There's so much music out there, and there's so much great music. It's like sometimes it's challenging for me to sort of sift through all that and see, well, what am I going to say, and also not to try to write things that sound like me, but also are sound new to me. So because sometimes you feel like this sounds like this sounds like this. I just wrote this new song, but it sounds like this song. It's
I hear you.
And some of that is that's part of your composer's voice, so you can acknowledge that. But also it's finding new ways to write. You asked about the melody part. I mean, I think at its core, I always want to have the melody and the bass note sounds good together, if nothing else. I mean, that's a very basic description. Yes, I want it to sound good together, but make sense together and not have a certain degree of counterpoint and melodic relationship of the bass and the melody. I think I there's something about my ear that just pushes me towards that. So that may be a core basic thing that's in a lot of my writing. But I'm definitely looking for new, harmonic devices and inspiration to sort of get me moving in take me to some different places. I tend to, I like to sit at the piano when I write. I'm not a good piano player at all, but I need to voice out chords and explore that way. Because that's just, love harmony and want to just dive deeper into that and figure out how to, just get better at that and write things that have a certain degree of logic to them and make sense to me, but also where I'm discovering new things. So you're not just writing the same song over and over. At the same time, I definitely use the bass too. I use the bass sometimes if it's just to feel, if it's, maybe it is coming up with a bass line or some kind of hook that's going to be part of a song. Sometimes you go to the bass, or sometimes I'll go to the bass. If I sit at the piano for a while and come up with a form, I might go to the bass to just kind of play through it. And if I can sort of sing the melody and play the bass line and see how does it feel, because the bass is that's sort of that's my comfort zone. That's where my intuition is best at work. Piano is not so much. I mean, you can just go down some black holes sometimes and be like, you think you're onto something, but you're just going down to something that's just kind of a compositional black hole that might be interesting. Well, you might be getting to something, but it may not stand up, may not make sense to just be part of a song, So it's like whereas the bass is like, I know what feels good and what doesn't. I know if a form feels good. I mean, sometimes you have to go through something. There are some things that might feel awkward, and you have to be, well, is this really awkward, or is it just because I can't play it yet? And so it's a cycle. But that's usually some osmosis of that I use to compose.
Yeah, Are you still planning to record something in the near future as a band leader, or I mean, do you have something planned?
Yeah, I definitely want to. Just recorded a few things. It was more of a collaborative thing. We did a collaborative thing with Mark Turner and Marcus Gilmore, just a trio recording a couple months ago where we all
Oh,
contributed
really? Oh,
some music.
beautiful, man.
So that has a couple of new things on it. But yes, I would like to do another, some sort of Joe Martin recording that's it could be a trio thing, but I need to work out some compositional things that I need to take some time, let's put it that way. I have these ideas rolling on in my head, and sometimes they're jotted down on paper, or I'll record them on my voice memo app on my phone just so I don't forget things, but then they sort of collect, and then you go back to them like a month later and you're like have to sort of almost like decode wait, what was I thinking, or what was it, what is that, and then but that can be a good thing too. It's like oh, okay, and then because then the things that stand out are like probably the things that were good ideas, and the things that are vague, maybe that's just what they were. They were incomplete thoughts, and then sometimes those things they get smushed together because they're maybe they're different. They were different ideas for different things, but they can be sometimes I'll
you can
just take ideas and they'll, what, this can work. Structurally, this could be another section of this tune, or it could be part of just I think the way every composer has different ways they write. I'm trying to get past this point of the problem with me is like, as we know, as improvisers, you can improvise because you're in real time, and we throw ideas away all the time while we're improvising. But when we sit behind, when we don't have the immediate time to deal with, and we're just sitting in front of, we're not playing a song, we're composing a song. It's a lot of editing going on. That's not always good. It is and it is not. It's a double-edged sword, because it's like if it's keeping you from writing anything, or it's just slowing you down so much because you're so critical of what you're writing, then I think it becomes a problem. And that's one of my little issues. I admitted, but you just got to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And trying to. The more you do it, the less that sometimes you have to let things go.
Yeah.
So talking out loud now.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would love to hear you without a chordal instrument as a band leader. I love when you play, with Jason and Jonathan and Mark, because there's no piano or guitar, and it's so open. You're there like basically all the time.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I've always enjoyed playing. Of course, it's a quartet, but it's a trio when it's the improvising part of it for most of the time. That relationship between the drums, the bass, and single note instrument. And so I've always loved playing that way. I mean, saxophone trio is one of my favorite. Some of my favorite recordings are that format. Whether it's Joe Henderson recordings or Sonny Rollins, or Net's music. I mean, same thing. It's like you're listening to this very sort of open harmonic conversation that has melody and harmony. Bass can function as of course as bass, as that functional thing, but also a little bit more melodically in a little bit. It's so I've always enjoyed that, and that back in those early days of playing up at Augie's when I would play with Joel. I mean, those were usually trio nights, and we played a lot of trio, and he also liked playing in that situation too. So we played, and that was mostly standards, but yeah, figuring out how to, how to make these songs happen in that format was always, I always enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love harmony, and I play, I love piano and guitar players, and I've played with a lot of them, and it's that's it's all good.
Absolutely.
Very important.
Absolutely. Who were you mentioned Sonny now and Joe Henderson and these guys. Who were bass wise your heroes, or the kind of this you said like, shit, I want to play like these guys, or whatever, or transcribe?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I got to go back. Now I got to go back a little bit farther, because I grew up. My first instrument as a child, when I started when I was probably about I want to say 7 or probably 8 years old, was the cello. And
Okay.
I grew up in a musical family. My father was a classical musician and clarinetist and music history professor. And my mom was not a professional musician, but she was a librarian by profession. They both worked at a small college in this town in Iowa where I grew up, Pella, Iowa. But she played violin and sang, and so there was a lot of music in the house. So, but it was a small town where I grew up, so I was playing the cello, but I had to choose a band instrument because there was no orchestral program in my school. So I chose the trumpet at that time, or was chosen for me, or sort of, however it worked. So I was playing trumpet when I was in middle school. So when I was, 11, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, this age range. And then I had braces, and trumpet was a pretty miserable instrument for me because it wasn't a very natural instrument. I mean, I was a good musician. I had very good ears, but I could figure things out and learn. But it was not fun for me at all. I just didn't have a natural embouchure, and then put braces on top of it. So,
Yeah.
so the bass. So when I got into high school, so when I was probably about 14, 15, there was, and so I'm still playing the trumpet and I'm playing cello, but not in my school because there's no orchestra program. So my father led a orchestra at the college where he worked. So I would play cello in that when I was a little bit older, but yeah, I hadn't found my instrument yet. I was a talented musician, but I was kind of miserable. And then I convinced my parents, I was really getting into rock. And I convinced my parents to give me a guitar. I wanted an electric guitar, but they split the difference and got me an acoustic electric guitar, which is basically an acoustic guitar. So I strummed around that for a year and was just trying to learn how to play, rock tunes, Led Zeppelin and just whatever, anything that had especially stuff that had like any kind of acoustic sounding thing, because that's what I had. So that's the thing that sounded most natural to play on. And then, but there was an electric. But my high school there was a jazz band, and there was actually a pretty good electric bass player he was a senior when I was a freshman, and he could kind of slap. He was doing like slap funk stuff, and he was pretty good at it, at least that time, that place. And I was like, wow, what's that? That's cool. And then, so there was this electric bass in the band room, and I just started when we would have free time, like study hall time. If you're in band, you could sign up and go to the band room and practice. So my friend who was playing drums, he would always be down there jamming on his drums, and there was this electric bass. So I was like, yeah, I had like 4 strings, plug it in. And so I just started noodling around on it, just jamming around on it, just nothing. So it's just, what does this feel like? And I was like, oh, okay, this is like, it's not the cello, but it has 4 strings, and it's, and I saw this person doing this cool stuff on it. So, okay. And I just kept doing that, just, noodling around while I was trying, playing rock tunes, whatever rock, my friend was a big metal head, or a rock head. So it's like anything that I could, come up with bass lines that sounded like this stuff, and playing by ear. And then my band director heard us doing this, and he kind of saw me doing this, and I had started to sort of teach myself to slap, I was like, okay. And I had sort of gotten a couple of licks together, and band director heard me do this, and it was like the end of my freshman year. He said, you want to take the bass home this summer? Just take it home, and maybe, here's a book, here's a method book, and here's some records. And I said, yeah, sure. And I also went to a jazz camp that summer,
Okay.
I think in some college in Missouri or something close to where I was living in Iowa. That's where I grew up. And yeah, I just got super into it. And my first, so yeah, this is the long answer to what were my,
No, please, I
my
love
bass
it.
heroes. I as much I would like to say my first bass heroes were, Charlie Hayden, Paul Chambers, and Ron Carter, and Wilbur Ware. I have to be perfectly honest and say my first foray into bass was funk players, was prog rock, but there was a lot of course great music. So, but in the jazz sense, so Stanley Clarke, let's say,
Really?
I saw him on there was a PBS public TV special, and it was a concert from Griffith Park. So it was Chick Corea, Stanley Clarke, Lenny White, and Joe Henderson. Playing that record from that. They had made a record in this from the Griffith Park collection. And then so I heard Stanley Clarke and saw him take the solo, and it was like I didn't even know what I was looking at, because it was like just sort of insane technique and speed. I was just like, oh my God. And I was like, what's that? So then I got very curious about Stanley Clarke, and then started buying Stanley Clarke records. So his first one, the orange cover, that's just a picture of him with the Alan Beck Electric, and called Stanley Clarke, and Journey to Love, and School Days. And I just started, buying these records. My parents, we would go to used record stores in Des Moines, Iowa. And I would just go and I just buy, he had all these records out. So I just started checking that out and trying to figure out. And so that was somebody who was playing both obviously jazz, but fusion, but I was very much into the electric bass aspect of it and funk players. So I was trying to figure that out. And so I got decent at that first, let's say. But then my band director was like, hey, but there's an upright bass maybe you can take that home too. It was this K upright with super high action and very not fun to play. But I tried to play it, and I would play it on the swing tunes of the big band tunes. So anyway, that's how it started. And then as I got more into, it's getting a bit long-winded, but as I got more into jazz and acoustic music, and of course my dad had a lot of great acoustic music. Like he loved Bill Evans Trio, Oscar Peterson Trio. He had a bunch of Miles records, Coltrane records. So this was all around, and he would put them on. And I remember one day I came home, and I came home from school, and he was usually not home at that time, but he was home, and he was listening to a record really loud. It wasn't a rock record, of course. It was a jazz record. It was Stan Getz' Captain Marvel, which also has Stanley Clarke, Chick, Stan Getz, of course. I think that's Tony Williams on that record. I don't know I forget if it's Tony or Lenny White. And anyway, it was listening really loud, and it was just like, I was like, oh, what? But it's acoustic record. But those guys, Chick's playing Rhodes, but it's still acoustic. It's an acoustic jazz record. They're playing jazz songs, and but I was like, wow, that sounds great. And I think that sort of, I just remember that as a sort of note to self moment. It's like, oh, jazz doesn't have to be like all quiet, and it can kind of rock out too, even in its acoustic form. And anyway. So as I got more into jazz and acoustic music, and then I went to college. I was still playing both electric and upright. I wasn't that great at upright, but I found a very good upright teacher at DePaul University in Chicago, a guy named Larry Gray, who is a phenomenal musician and bass player. And he kind of played bass very well, also played classical music, but a great jazz musician. And so I studied with him for 2 years. And then once I got out to New York, I felt like I was meeting people who were younger than me, who knew, they're playing like, let's play all these Sonny Rollins tunes. And I was like, I had to very quickly get my, I realized, that I really need to focus. People, I met, so I went to William Patterson, and I remember, there were just great people who were very serious about jazz, and it wasn't about fusion, or it was really about acoustic music, learning standards, studying the tradition, and so then my 2 years at William Patterson were literally just devoted to that. All I did was practice, and I lived in a house with 3 other musicians, a drummer, trumpet player, and a guitar player. We put carpet up all over the living room so we could play all night. We lived at the end of a dead end street. It was kind of a shithole, but it was our jazz. Yeah. That's where we lived, and I just was playing music and dealing with music all day, all night long. Yeah, and that kind of continued once I moved into New York too, in a sort of different way. Those first years in New York, it was just like meeting people, going out to sessions, jam sessions, meeting people, getting exchanging numbers, going and playing jam sessions in Brooklyn, meeting people, playing sessions, practicing all day. It was very intense.
When you're younger, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's sorry, but as far as like, so yeah, so far I've given you, let's say Stanley Clark, let's say Daryl Jones.
Really? Oh yeah, of course. 80s
Yeah,
Miles.
these
Yeah.
so going back to no, I'm
Yeah.
serious. Like that electric thing was really a part of me, even though I
Hmm.
don't play much electric anymore or to get called to do much on it. And I don't consider, I mean, when I love it, but I don't, I kind of left it to the side. So I always feel a bit awkward on it now, but it's still very much a part of like, my part of me, that music and R&B, and the, funk and fusion players, Larry Graham. There's this
Yeah.
great. My mom was a violin player, so my dad bought her these Jean-Luc Ponty records from the '70s. So there's like he had a great bass player named Ralph
Oh yeah,
Armstrong,
with Alan
great
Holdsworth on
electric
guitar,
player.
those records, and
Yeah, Holdsworth
yeah,
played on some of those records, but I mean, this bass player Ralph Armstrong
yeah,
played great bass player from Detroit who played with Ponty and on these records, and very very cool. So I would be checking all that stuff out. However, getting into jazz and getting into acoustic and really getting more serious about it, it was I spent transcribed a lot of Paul Chambers, a lot of Ray Brown, a lot of Ron Carter, a lot of Charlie Hayden. As far as Percy Heath, those were like big. That was like when I was really like, okay, I've got a lot to learn, because and so that's really where I started getting things together.
yeah,
As an upright player, and learning the tradition, and then just playing a ton, and then going into the city and hearing as many of these people as possible. So yeah, I would hear Ron, I would hear yeah, gosh, I don't know, Robert Hurst, Charnette Moffett,
yeah, everyone, yeah,
Larry Grenadier was on the scene, so he was playing. So I'd go hear Joe Anderson, and Larry was playing with that. And those were very. I was like, I remember hearing Larry for the first time and being like, wow, okay, this is like, and he's a little bit older than me, but
yeah.
but it was like, I'm very impressed. And of course, hearing Chris McBride, who else? There was Ray Drummond. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I just go in town and just anytime I could hear it, I would just soaking it up and go to the clubs and hear these, sit as close as possible if I could, or sit at the bar if that's all I could afford, whatever. And just, soak it up and take notes. What tunes were they playing? The things that I like. I mean, I was, a student. I was
yeah,
just checking out as much as possible, and then of course, met people, my generation people. I mean, yeah, Ben Street was already here, so I, met him a bit. Reed Anderson had moved here. Matt Penman was around. Eric Revis. I mean, I don't know. There's a
oh
bunch
yeah,
of
exactly. Yeah.
just people who were around similar generation who moved to New York around that time who were around. There's so many. I already
Yeah.
mentioned like Omer. Um, yeah, there was a bunch of cats around playing, and
Amazing, yeah,
yeah. So I'm just soaking it up as much as possible.
yeah, amazing,
So
man.
those
Yeah,
I don't know primary influences, but there's definitely other influences as well. And as far as the melodic side of, I think I always like songs. I've always liked songs, whether it's pop songs or jazz song standards. It's like that. I like to have some kind of melody to relate to, no matter how far abstract things get. Things that the ear can gravitate to. At least when I write.
yeah, that's
So.
what definitely stands out when you're a band leader. I think this song concept, I'll put it like that, but yeah,
Yeah,
melody, which is great,
yeah.
Or I mean, Ornette has melodies, and Paul Motion has like
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean that's part of the beauty of all
whoever,
this. It's not as sometimes it's not as abstract as you think it is. When you really get
absolutely.
down to it. It's
It
like
can be,
actually,
but yeah,
yeah, it can be, but
but
it's like those guys. They were writing. They were writing tunes.
melodies, absolutely.
Melodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Joe, what is still on the schedule for you for this year or next year? Like, what are some of the projects you're involved with or touring wise going to Europe? Or...
Well, that's a good question. Let's see. I just came back from. I was on the road quite a bit with Mark this summer. We played in Europe and China, so with the quartet with Jason Palmer and Jonathan Pinson. So we played about a week in Europe and then about a week in China. So
beautiful.
and had a great time. So, and we hadn't really played as a group since last year. So last year we had done a tour in spring of 2024, and we recorded a new record after that tour. However, that record is not out yet. It's a record for ECM. So that's hopefully that will come out at some point. I think it might be more likely that it comes out next year, just schedule wise with what I understood. But yeah, I'm gonna be this fall. I'm gonna be probably mostly freelancing around New York. Like I said, I want to continue working on some writing of my own. There's some recordings that I played on in the last year or so that are coming out now. Nice one with a great piano player from South Korea, but who's here in New York, Dabin Ryu. Trio record with her and Jonathan Blake. I really like that project. She's quite a special musician. So that record is coming out soon. And I think there's a record that did earlier this year, that this record, Dave Kikowski record with Billy Hart and Randy Recker, that's coming out.
I saw that. Yeah. You and Billy.
I think that's coming out soon. I actually haven't really heard it since we recorded it, so I'm actually curious. I want to be a curious listener as well, because I want to hear how that came out. I remember it being a lot of fun, and playing with heroes is I don't take it for granted. So, had also played with Al Foster earlier in the year.
Yeah, on Jerome's record, right?
That's on Jerome's record, and we also played up with his quartet at Smoke back in January, which was a few months before he passed. So that was definitely a highlight of things, and still sort of stunned that he's gone, right? Because he was such a force, and that was a very important thing for me, getting to have the opportunity to play with him a bit these last few years in a few different settings. So of course he'll always be with us, but these losses are tough. So, but yeah, so I'm trying to think what else is going on. But yeah, I'll mostly be around New York this fall, playing in town and teaching a bit. So
fantastic, beautiful.
Yeah,
I hope to catch you in Europe soon again. So
in
whatever format,
Where are you? You're located in?
I'm like Slovenia. I'm like you know where Graz is in Austria? I think you played in Graz.
Yeah.
I'm like half an hour south from Graz in Slovenia.
Okay.
So Maribor.
Okay.
It's like a small town. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was just in Slovenia a couple months ago.
Really?
In spent a few days in Ljubljana.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting gig because it was with the singer Magos Herrera and her project, but it wasn't exactly we were playing as part of this conference, so it was a multifaceted conference. It wasn't just music; it was a whole lot of other stuff going on there. But we played with the string quartet and her music, and that was fun. Oh, right. And Ljubljana's a beautiful city.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Really enjoyed my time there for those few days. So
yeah. Well, next time you're around,
I'll definitely
drop me a line. We'll get together for
sure.
Dinner or beer or whatever. So
for sure.
Beautiful.
For sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Joe, I'll leave you a nice afternoon you have there. So.
Thanks so much. Thanks for
finding the time, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll send you a link when this is out. So
perfect. Thanks.
Cool.
Take care, man.
Stay strong.
Bye.
Ciao.